Can the Detroit Lions actually win a Super Bowl this year? That has been the question that Lions fans have been asking since January, that the media has been asking for months, that the entire NFL needs to know. Can the Detroit Lions actually do it? Last year's Cinderella story, a team that took the NFL by storm, won their division for the first time in 30 years, won a playoff game for the first time in 32 years, went to the NFC Championship game and was one half away from completing the Cinderella story run to the Super Bowl, fell just short in the end. A fourth quarter collapse led the Detroit Lions to feeling like a failure at the end of the 2023 season. And despite all that they accomplished, the looming overlook of the season was a disappointment. They didn't make the Super Bowl, they didn't play their best when it mattered, and it cost them dearly. But the Detroit Lions went into 2024 with a plan. They went in and fixed a lot of their team needs. They improved a lot of their depth situations. And now we're gearing up for a 2024 run that could look even more promising than its last. So today, we're going to take a look at the Detroit Lions 2024 outlook. Take a look at this team, what they did last season, whether or not they were able to add enough pieces to truly become Super Bowl contenders, taking a look at each position, the schedule, how this offense and defense look and project for 2024. And at the end, answer the question of whether or not the Lions are true Super Bowl contenders or a singular flash in the pan. So let's start off with last season. The Detroit Lions were no joke last year. They weren't some lucky Cinderella team that snuck into the playoffs. They were legitimately good with a top five offense, ranking second in scoring, fifth in rushing, and fifth in scoring overall. They were a fantastic overall offense. They were high flying. They had a great passing attack, a great rushing attack. Jared Goff was second in the NFL in passing yards. The Detroit Lions had arguably the best running back duo with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in the NFL. Their offensive line was elite. Sam Laporta came out as a rookie and was a second team All-Pro. Ben Johnson, one of the best offensive coordinators at the helm, leading the ship. Everything was firing on all cylinders for the Lions offense, and it was a big reason as to why they were able to go as far as they were and succeed as much as they did. However, the defensive side of the ball was a little bit of a different story. They excelled in one area, but fell flat in several others. They were one of the best run defenses in the NFL, ranking second in the league in rushing yards allowed and rushing touchdowns. But in a game that is really heavily associated with passing, of course, everybody says it's a passing league nowadays. The Detroit Lions secondary ranked just 27th in the league, and the Lions overall as a defense ranked just 23rd as an overall defense as well as a scoring defense in 2023. The rushing defense and the secondary were good enough to not cost the Detroit Lions games, but very rarely did we see the defense win the Detroit Lions any games. It was always the offense. It was always an offensive performance that we looked back on with promise, and the defense was always an afterthought, and a good thing the Lions have their strong offense to make up for their lackluster defense. So going into 2024, right after the collapse of the NFC Championship game, the Detroit Lions wanted to boost up their defense. They wanted to add to their team in ways that would make it so that the defense not only wasn't a liability, but could actually be a strength of this football team. They went into the offseason and upgraded at offensive line. They upgraded at secondary. They upgraded at defensive line. They upgraded a lot of depth at different positions, as well as the coaching staff as a whole. Right on the offensive line, they lose Jonah Jackson, a Pro Bowl player, a Pro Bowl guard for them. And you might say, well, how did you upgrade that? Well, you got one of the best guards over the last decade in the NFL in Kevin Zeitler, a player that has not only put up better statistics than Jonah Jackson over the last couple of years, but has been healthier than Jonah Jackson over the last couple of years. The big reason the Lions didn't take Jackson back was the fact that he's missed upwards of 6 to 7 games a season over the last 2 to 3 years. You can't pay a player massive money if you're not going to have a reliable source of playmaking, right? If he's not going to be on the field for a third of the season, you can't pay him like a top guard. And instead of paying Jonah Jackson $14 million a year, they upgraded and got Kevin Zeitler for 1 year, $6 million. I think the line overall is better than it was last year. I think it'll be more consistent and a lot healthier than it was last year. Of course, knock on wood. But overall, I think the offensive line got better. The secondary might be the biggest source of improvement this offseason for the Lions, trading a third-round selection for Carlton Davis from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, drafting Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw with your top two selections in the 2024 NFL Draft, signing Amik Robertson out of free agency, bringing back Emmanuel Mosley, who unfortunately won't play early in the year, but could be massive down the stretch for this team. The Lions put a lot of capital and a ton of resources into their secondary, and in particular, into their cornerback room, and it is significantly more talented this year. Kendall Vilder, a player that was a starter for the Detroit Lions, a cornerback two for the Detroit Lions, covering guys like CeeDee Lamb on a weekly basis last year, is now the Detroit Lions cornerback six. That is how much talent and how much depth was added to this roster and to this room over the last couple of months, and it should be significantly improved from where it was a season ago. The defensive line got better. Of course, the prize of free agency, DJ Reader, has officially joined the Detroit Lions defensive line. But even other than that, James Houston returns as a fully healthy player. Marcus Davenport, the first free agent signing from this offseason, is a player that, when healthy, has been making a lot of plays, has been able to be a consistent pass rusher, has been able to improve every defensive line he's been a part of. And of course, yeah, you're going to have to miss a couple of games. There's a chance that Marcus Davenport gets hurt again. There's a chance that he still can't stay on the field. But if he does stay on the field, that defensive line is 10 times better than it was last year. And even if he isn't, I think Josh Paschal and James Houston are more than capable of picking up that slack. But of course, the addition of DJ Reader on the interior takes the Detroit Lions from a top two rushing defense in the league to potentially putting them at number one. The depth overall, I thought, has improved quite significantly. The depth at offensive line, the depth in the secondary, the depth at linebacker, the depth at defensive line, the depth with, tight end is really good. The depth at quarterback is better than it was last year. At running back, it's better than it was last year. Of course, adding guys like Sione Vaki, Giovanni Manu through the draft. On the defensive side of the ball, guys like Amik Robertson are depth players despite being really, really good. Right? Amik Robertson might start in the slot, but overall, the secondary got better. Amik Robertson and Ennis Rakestraw will be fighting for a depth position, right? The safety room got deeper with Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, Brandon Joseph, and Ifeatu Melifonwu. And then, of course, you have the staff. As the Detroit Lions made a couple of changes, the big one, of course, being Tyrell Williams. Arguably the best defensive line coach in the NFL comes from the Tennessee Titans to the Detroit Lions. And with the additions at the defensive line for the Lions, with, of course, DJ Reader and Marcus Davenport, and you have Aiden Hutchinson and James Houston and Josh Paschal on that defensive line, now that they have a true, really, really good coaching staff and a great defensive line coach, I think the sky is the limit for this Lions defensive line. And not only are they more talented, but this year they will be better coached, right? The last time they had a great defensive line coach was Todd Wash in 2022. And the Lions pass rush looked really, really strong and great overall. Now they're more talented than that 2022 team. They have a better coach than that 2022 team, and especially better than their 2023 counterparts. And overall, the Lions got better at a lot of positions. And in fact, I would argue that they are one of the most complete teams in the NFL, with top 10 positions at quarterback, with, of course, Jared Goff and Hendon Hooker, with running back arguably being the best positional group in the NFL, with David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Craig Reynolds, and Sione Vaki all being on this roster, having a four-strong running back room. They might have the deepest and most talented running back room in all of the NFL. The tight end room, of course, Sam Laporte is a top 5 tight end in the NFL, but Brock Wright, I would argue, is probably a top 10 tight end too in the NFL when you look at it, right? He's a great blocker. He's a reliable receiver. He's a security blanket with strong hands. And the Lions, of course, just gave him a 3-year contract for $12 million. No one's going to argue that the Lions' offensive line is one of the best, if not the best, in the NFL. And as we've already talked about, the defensive line has made significant strides as well. A fully healthy defensive line of Aiden Hutchinson, Marcus Davenport, 2 former first-round selections who have played a lot of really good reps in the NFL, with DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil, 2 Pro Bowl caliber defensive tackles. That's got to be one of the top 10 offensive lines in all of football. And then you take a look at the safety position. Brian Branch was almost an all-pro as a rookie. You have Kirby Joseph, who is arguably the best safety from his draft class from a production standpoint. You have Ifeatu Malafanu, who finished the year incredibly strongly last year on a defensive player of the year type campaign through the final 6 weeks. You have Brandon Joseph, a player that shined throughout the preseason and was great for the Detroit Lions over his last 3 games. And of course, the rest of that secondary, I think, is going to be really strong as well. But with their inexperience, it's hard to say that they're a top 10 positional group already. But even so, that's 4 positional groups on the offense and 2 on the defense that are easily top 10 in their position rankings in the NFL. And the rest of the team really doesn't have a lot of weaknesses either. I would argue that the Detroit Lions are one of the most, if not the most complete teams in the NFL, with their few weak spots being, of course, wide receiver depth, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown, the all-pro, really, really good. If Jameson Williams can come along as a true wide receiver too, I think that this question mark goes away. I think if Jameson Williams can put up 800 to 1,000 yards, put up 6 to 8 touchdowns next year, which is a very realistic goal for him to reach, that question mark of wide receiver depth goes away because Amon-Ra St. Brown's capable of putting up 1,515, right? Jameson Williams would then be capable of putting up, 800, 900 yards and 6 to 8 touchdowns, which is really good for a wide receiver too. Khalif Raymond would continue to put up about 500 to 600 yards and 2 to 3 touchdowns a year as the wide receiver 3. You, of course, then in the receiving game as well, still have guys like Brock Wright and Sam Laporta. So I think if Jameson Williams does work out, which seems more likely than not at this point, that the wide receiving question goes away. Edge rushing depth could be a potential issue, right? With John Kaminsky going down and missing part of the season and a majority of the season at that. Yeah, the edge rushing depth is a little bit weak. If Marcus Davenport gets hurt, it's James Houston and Josh Paschal, 2 players that I think are very good, but then behind them, there's not a whole lot there. Now, Levi Onwuzurike has been taking reps at the edge rushing position as well, so that could add a little bit of depth as well as maybe a Mekhi Wingo kicking out to the outside, but overall, I'd say that is maybe just a little bit thin. And then, of course, the secondary experience, right? Despite adding so much talent, there is a lot of inexperience in that secondary. They haven't played very much together. Carlton Davis and Terrion Arnold had never played a game on the same field, and they're cornerbacks 1 and 2, right? Amik Robertson is brand new to this secondary. Even Ennis Rakestraw is brand new to this secondary. So I think there's going to be probably a few growing pains, probably some miscommunications here and there early in the season. But overall, even that weakness, I think, is going to be overcome by the sheer amount of talent that is on this secondary and in the cornerback room specifically. So the Detroit Lions are easily, I think, a top 10, probably a top 5 roster in all of football. They have a great quarterback, a great offensive line, a top running game, a great receiver, a top 10 tight end, top 5 tight end. They have a great defense with great additions through the offseason. They are truly a top 5 roster in the NFL from top to bottom. And I don't think that's truly debatable among NFL fans. Taking a look at the schedule, I think the Lions have a pretty favorable schedule to repeat what they did last year. They play the Packers, Vikings, and Bears twice, of course, with their division matchups. They should go at least 4-2 in these matchups. Dan Campbell, as a head coach, has never been worse in the division than 3-3. Even in his worst season, right? Even in his very first season, Dan Campbell went 3-3 in the division. He was really, really good. He was, always a coach that has been great within the NFC North, and I don't see that being anything less this year, right? I think that they should at least split with the Packers. They should at least split with the Bears, and realistically, they should sweep the Vikings. They should be at least 4-2. They can steal one on the road in Lambeau or steal one at Soldier Field or, sweep the Bears or Packers. Of course, that would be ideal. But realistically, they should go 4-2 within the division. They should be at least 4-2, if not 5-1, because I think they are the best team within this division. Taking a look at some of the games that I think the Lions are favored in, I think games that we look at and say, yeah, the Lions should probably win that. They go to Arizona and they should win. 9 times out of 10, the Detroit Lions take this game. The Lions should come back home to the Seahawks, and they should win that game. Now, again, the Seahawks are kind of the Lions' kryptonite. They don't always win those games. They don't always put up the best numbers or the best play in those games. Offensively, they're always really strong, but defensively, they always tend to struggle. So that might be a game that the Lions drop. They should beat the Titans. They are more talented than the Titans. They should beat the Colts. They are more talented than the Colts, and they should go into Jacksonville and take that game as well. They are a better football team than all 5 of the teams listed here. Will they drop one? Probably. There's going to be games that the Lions should win and they won't. So I think that at minimum they should go 4-1, if not a perfect 5-0 throughout this stretch as well. Then we get into some of the tougher games, right? The Rams, the Bucks, the Cowboys, the Texans, the Bills, the 49ers, the Lions playoff matchups within the regular season. I think the Lions should go 4-2 in these games. I think they should beat the Rams on opening night. They should beat the Bucks the week after that. I think they should beat the Bills. I think they're more talented than the Bills. That's at least 3 teams that they should be beating. I think they go into Dallas, and I think they have a good chance of winning that game. I think they go into Houston, and I think they put up a massive fight in that game. And they, of course, then go to the 49ers in Week 17, and they take on the team that ended their Super Bowl hopes a season ago. Within those last 3 games at Dallas, at Houston, at the 49ers, they should take at least one of those games. Those are games that the Lions have personal connections with, especially Dallas and the 49ers, right? The Texans, not so much, but especially they're going to circle Dallas. They're going to circle San Francisco on their schedule. And those are games that I think the Lions will be ready for. And I think that they're going to be able to take. So 4-2 in this stretch, I think feels very realistic, feels like something the Lions should be able to accomplish, which means at a minimum, the Lions should be 12-5 this year. Now, whether or not that's good enough for the 1 seed, I'm not sure, right? That's going to put them somewhere in the 1 to 3 seed, potentially as the 1st seed, potentially as the 3rd seed, as we saw a season ago. They should have a top offense and a top defense in the NFL. And overall, to answer the question, yes, the Detroit Lions are real contenders. The Detroit Lions are true Super Bowl favorites, and they rightfully should be. They have constructed one of the best and most complete rosters in the NFL. They have a top quarterback, a top offensive line, a top wide receiver, a top pass rusher, a top cornerback, a top safety room, a good defensive line. They should dominate in the trenches. They should dominate through the air. If you were to construct a perfect football team, just like from memory or from, hey, how do you construct a roster? Everybody's going to say, great quarterback, the Lions have that. Great offensive line, the Lions have that. Good defensive line, the Lions have that. True wide receiver 1, the Lions have that. True weapon 2, potentially tight end, potentially wide receiver, the Detroit Lions have that. Every major position that is important to winning Super Bowls, the Detroit Lions have in an abundance. They are a top 5, if not top 10 team at all of those positions. And then you add on some of the lesser important positions, but still good for the team. They have arguably the best running back room in football. They have arguably one of the best safety rooms in football. I think their linebacking core is incredibly underrated. There is no weakness to this team. The coaching staff is strong. The offense is strong. The defense is strong. And they are true contenders for the 2024 Super Bowl. They should make the playoffs. They should win their division. And when they're in the playoffs, I don't think there's a single team that you can say definitively is a better team than the Detroit Lions overall. Now, with all of that being said, that is just my opinion. Of course, down in the comments, let me know what you think about the Detroit Lions 2024 campaign. If you're an Eagles fan or a Cowboys fan or a 49ers fan or any fan of another NFC team, let me know what your opinion from an outside perspective. What do you think the Detroit Lions are going to accomplish this year, and how good do you think they're going to be? Will they have sustained success? Will they repeat as NFC North champions? Will they repeat as NFC North or NFC Championship contenders? That is yet to be seen. I think that they will, but of course, we will have to wait and see throughout the season. With all of that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. Of course, as I said, leave down below in the comments your opinions of this 2024 roster, this 2024 schedule, and of course, your expectations for the season. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.